Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for this discussion on removing obstacles on occupational licensing. My name is Eric Cohn. I am the Director of Communications here at the Acton Institute, and we're really thrilled to have you joining us for this important conversation in the context of poverty and removing obstacles for people looking to rise out of poverty. This is, I think, a really important issue and one that I don't think gets the attention it deserves. So we're really glad to be able to give it some of that attention today with two really great guests who can speak well on this subject. And I'd like to introduce them to you now. First, Isis Brantley. Isis Brantley discovered her bliss as an ancestral natural hairstylist and cultural artist while still a teen. Opening a little hair braiding shop in sunny South Dallas, she went on to become one of the leading international authorities in natural hair care for peoples of the African diaspora. Presently, her main focus is on natural hair in the workplace and schools, a birthright now commonly known as the Crown Act. Her message of economic liberty also resonates with any group that believes in financial independence. In 1997, Isis was arrested for the high crime of braiding without a license. And that was the beginning of a 20-year battle with the state of Texas, culminating in her win in 2015 in federal court for the state having violated her rights under the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Shortly afterward, Governor Greg Abbott signed House Bill 2717, now known as the Isis Brantley Bill, number 2717, freeing all natural hair braiders from licensing requirements. Also very thrilled to be joined today by Shoshana Weissman. Shoshana is the Senior Manager of Digital Media and a Policy Fellow at the R Street Institute, a free market think tank in Washington, D.C. She manages RSI's social media, email marketing, and digital assets while working on policy issues, including occupational licensing reform. Isis, Shoshana, thanks so much for joining us for this.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us.
Isis, I'd like to start with you. I mentioned a little bit about your story there in your bio. Could you recount for us your story starting in 1997 with this arrest and the fight you engaged in over the coming years?
Sure. It was unexpected. I had already been cultivating and doing natural hair for years in my community. I didn't know that it was against the law. It's what we do. It's called informal economy that we do and we've always done in impoverished communities. Because all of a sudden, with no warning, 7 cops came into my salon and they arrested me and said that my crime was braiding without a cosmetology license. And it happened when I was younger with 5 children. Mothers are the ones that put the food on the table, when the men are not there to assist. And I had to go through a lot to just retrieve my legacy, to feed my kids, to be where I am today. And it went on for 20 years, and I had to go on the front line constantly before people to say, I don't think I did anything wrong. I'm not using chemicals. I'm not using sharp instruments. It's my cultural legacy that my ancestors left me. And I want to make sure that I help my community solve problems with their natural gifts and the art of ancestral braiding. That was really my stance on the situation. I never felt that I was guilty. So that's pretty much what happened.
Isis, could you expand on that a little? So what you were accused of running afoul of with, you mentioned the chemical part of it and the sharp object part of it, that it was a cosmetology requirement that they were saying you needed a certain amount of time and to have invested a certain amount of money to get a cosmetology license. What were those requirements that they claimed you needed?
I needed to get, first of all, I needed to be licensed by beauty schools that didn't teach ancestral braiding. Their laws and their curriculum did not include tightly textured hair. And that was about $20,000 for me to go and become a full-fledged cosmetologist. Then I had to be a school and to teach and to train the next generation. I had to become a barber instructor, which was another $12,000 to $15,000. And they said that it was illegal for me to do cultural art or ancestral braiding without this license. So it was just very burdensome. I didn't know how I would be able to survive having to come up with so much money. And then the little space where I operated was very small. They also wanted me to have 2,500 square foot building to operate out of. And they just wanted me to just go away and forget about, being a part of a market or an industry that would help to uplift my people and to bring money and to bring food to the table for my children. So those were the requirements. And there was no way I could have given that kind of money being in a very low income community, striving to be an entrepreneur and doing what just came natural to me. So they wanted me to comply, and it was very difficult for me to say I would comply. I said, this is unfair. The schools are not just. They exclude other people who do natural things. And I wanted my own natural school so that we didn't have to have the hair altered in any way. And we could just be happy with the hair that we were born with.
And would I be correct in assuming that there would be really no reason for you to have expected that any of this would be required of you in order to get into the line of work that you were clearly qualified for, because you had been doing it for so long and had so many happy customers as a result of it?
Absolutely. I was changing lives, taking women off the streets, giving them an opportunity to learn the art, helping mothers feed their children. And I'm not a food babe. And, putting roofs over people's heads. I remember, a lot of ladies would come and say, I don't even have money to pay my rent. And I would tell them that you can pay your rent by learning this art. And so it was me in the community making sure that people were solving their problems with poverty and giving them an opportunity to bring out that gift, that natural gift that they already had, so that they could make and turn into a too. Many of the people who were coming were young ladies that were also being policed in their apartments. And if someone told on them and said that they were actually braiding, the police would come and tell them that they would go to jail if they continued. So, yeah, it was just, my calling. That's the only way I could put it. And because I'm an advocate for women and for children, I want to see them do better.
Shoshana, you hear Isa's story and it strikes you as being incredible and exceptional in a lot of ways. How common or uncommon are stories like these across the country, around the world, of people who are doing what they know how to do, they're making customers happy, and they're completely unaware of these licensing requirements they may be running afoul of?
It's so frustrating because there's so many regulations on the books. It's not like there's, one or two, or maybe just some common sense ones. They just span so broadly. Even in Louisiana, you have to have a license to arrange flowers. And whether it's hair braiding or it's arranging flowers, they're both arts, but they're also both things that aren't going to harm people. There's not really any cause to have concern there, but government just regulates everything. And I'm okay with, real health or safety regulations, but going after people like Isis, helping her community, making a living for her family, and teaching other people to do the same is just disgusting. It's so frustrating how many times I hear stories like this. There was a case of a man in Arizona who was cutting hair for the homeless. He was actually a cosmetology student too, so he was even going through the process, but his mom had cancer, so you see the hair tie-in there. And he wanted to help out homeless people, help them get back on their feet, make them more presentable so they're more likely to get jobs and also more likely to be able to help out in their communities and be a part of it. And the cosmetology board cracked down on him for it. It's frustrating because I hear stories like this constantly, a little bit less so these days. I think the deregulation that's been happening across the country is helping, thankfully, but we need more of it. It's every time I hear a story like ISIS's, it breaks my heart. It's just, we're stopping good people from doing good things, from being the kind of people we want, we say we want in America, who just contribute so much to their communities. Even preventing nurses from working with an expanded scope of practice and being able to treat people when doctors are overwhelmed, or there's just so many different cases of it. But one kind of funny thing that I have that relates here is that I actually do my own hair. I know how to bleach it. I know how to dye it. I've taught myself. I've done a lot of research, a lot of practice and trial, a little bit of error. But even working with chemicals, it's something that there's alternate ways to learn. But government just regulates for this one path. You must do this one thing we say, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it doesn't relate or teach the thing that we're saying we want you to do, you still have to do it. And that kills so much good spirit in America. So many entrepreneurs, it's always hard to account for what didn't happen. But I'm so thankful for people like Isis, who just, she shouldn't have had to spend the last 20 years fighting. And it kills me that she did, that it took away from the work that she was doing that was more important than this. But that she had to spend 20 years fighting for her right to do something so simple, but so beautiful. It just, I'm thankful for people like the Institute for Justice and Pacific Legal Foundation and other groups that help these people fight, but they just shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have this presumption of guilt for people doing safe things. There's not even complaints against them. So this is wildly common across all different kinds of careers. It's just, it frustrates me every single time.
Yeah, could you explore that a little bit? You gave some examples with flower arranging of licensing requirements for that. We've talked about hair braiding and licensing requirements for that. What are some other of the occupational licensing requirements that exist out there that might surprise people to learn that you need to invest X amount of hours and Y amount of money in order to do something that to regular people might seem just so obvious and so common that if you've got the talent and you can deliver on it, you should just be able to do it?
One that's always up there for me is auctioneers, like literally the people who call out numbers and like, oh, this guy wants to pay more for it. Like, to be a licensed auctioneer. I mean, I'm sure there's skill involved with it, but I don't think that people are going to suffer if the people calling out numbers aren't licensed, or boxing announcers, stuff like that. Even fire alarm installers, a lot of times they're already licensed in something, but they need a duplicate license. With contractors too, you get that a lot. And I'm sympathetic that, a lot of times people make the argument, oh, well, you don't want contractors skipping out of town and harming people, but there's lower barriers that would solve that. But in a lot of all this stuff is licensed. People who handle food aren't always licensed. It kind of depends, but we put up these wild barriers in so many cases, or duplicate barriers too. Not only does your plumber have to be licensed on the state level, but sometimes cities make him be licensed on that level as well. And there was even a study, and I think it was by Mercatus, that showed, I'm open to regulation if it makes sense. So I wasn't initially super opposed, but there was a study that came out to show that when electricians are licensed, there's this unintended consequence of people taking it into their own hands, because there's fewer electricians, fewer people able to go through the different barriers. So there's actually more harm done because people try the stuff at home. Even with good and well-intended regulations, when it's not just regulatory capture in an industry saying, we only want us doing this, we don't want other people doing this, there can be those consequences. So even, there's so many ridiculous examples from fortune tellers too. You wouldn't want someone to be bad at fortune telling. And I'm not even sure how the government would go about checking for quality there or anything like that. But even with professions that we might look at and say, oh, well, maybe we want them licensed, it's still worth it to think, not only is this license working, but even if it's working to cut out professionals that aren't as great, is it harming people more broadly? There's so many questions along the way. And I think a lot of times people just think about regulations as like a nicety, like, oh, this will just help people. And even if it does on some level, we need to make sure that it's not harming many more.
That's a really good lesson about the law of unintended consequences, that you could have good intentions in wanting to license electricians without realizing that if you make it prohibitively expensive, that people start doing it themselves, and the risk of the wiring being bad, house catching on fire, is not one that is maybe properly considered by people who are licensing these people or coming up with these ideas for licensing regimes. Isis, I want to come back to you. 20 years, that is an incredible amount of time to be fighting for what you were fighting for. You talked about what the initial experience of it was, the shock that you had for being arrested for doing what you know how to do. What was the fight like? Like, what were those 20 years like, and how did you keep yourself going through that entire process?
Not only was it 20 years, but I had a full-fledged trial. I was put on trial and found guilty for breeding in Dallas. The 20 years was all about me trying to sustain my family, myself, my livelihood, trying to figure out other ways that I could be creative and things that I could do to compensate for not elevating my business to the level of an Ogle or Tony the Guy and all the people that thrived in the industry. It was very, very hard. It was a terrible hardship upon my children. I wasn't able to spend a lot of time with my 5 children, personal time, one-on-one time. I remember a lot of the Christmas times when people are happy and they're able to bring back gifts to their children. That never happened in that 20 years for my children. I'm still putting my pieces back together. I got the red tape cut, or we got the red tape cut, but there was no compensation for that. That happens a lot in the impoverished communities, the low-income communities, where when these laws when the regulations are created against people who want to maybe make blankets or do their own shoes or create a little stand where they're selling popcorn and lemonade, they can't do it if they go outside or over across the other way. You can't cross the tracks, but you can always do it safely. And I was doing it safely in my community. But when I came out of my community and got a storefront, that's when all of the pieces began to fall apart. So it was very, very difficult. Me being a mother who I didn't get my degrees. I dropped out of college to do a service for my people. And it was something that made me happy. My mom wanted me to go to college to become an actress, but somehow I found my wings and began to fly over all the obstacles that I was seeing in college. Things that I saw in college were really horrible. The way that the women were treated about their hair, their head wraps, their beauty. I mean, everything was like there was some kind of barrier there that stopped them from being themselves. And I thought, well, this is something that I can take on, because I too, as a kid, didn't like myself. I didn't like my hair. I didn't like my skin color. And I had to learn that that's the most beautiful thing that God has given me. It's different, just like any plant, just like other animals. Everything is beautiful the way that it is naturally created. And then I took on this love for helping people to grow and to build self-esteem and to love themselves regardless to how many doors are closed or how many laws are created against them. It was very difficult, but it made it through. It's like the pendulum. It swings far to the right and then back to the left. So as long as I was able to look at my challenges and go at them with great courage, I did well for myself and for my children. And I'm still trying to help my children, because you never know what type of generational trauma you're creating when these doors are closed, when there is no way for you to do what you came, your purpose, what you came here to do. your dreams, your aspirations. And when those things are shattered, it's very difficult for people to pick that back up. And you don't know how long this lasts with young people. When it started, my kids were very young. They were 3 and 5 and 7 and 12. And so you never know where they stop growing in the midst of all of this chaos. But I can say that I am really happy for ITA. I'm happy to have found, other light energy around that were in support of pushing back on the government. And that increased a lot of prosperity for me, mentally, physically, and spiritually. So I can say that I felt like I was still locked up in a prison that was refusing to let me out. And once I was able to get out, I felt so relieved. It didn't really matter if I got money. It didn't really matter if I was compensated in any way. What mattered is that I wanted to be from behind those bars.
You raise a really important point in there, that it's not just the fight that you had to go through and having a partner like the Institute for Justice to help you with that fight. It's also the lost opportunity and income from the years that you went through fighting that fight. And for all the people out there who don't think that there are resources, who don't know that there are resources, who don't have really the bravery and the wherewithal that you had to go through that might just give up and move on to something else.
Absolutely. And I see it all the time. Whenever there's an obstacle, wherever there is a law that's impeding the progress of the disenfranchised communities, people get up. But I'm not a person that gets up. I came from a mother who was 14, who had her 5 children at the age of 23, who never gave up. It was very creative, and it was just so much love that this lady shared. Because when you are forced to be in a small community, you will be creative in the best way. She worked 3 jobs. She was very, very positive, and she helped us. And, people say you come from families with just one parent, then it's very difficult for you to make it. Well, I can say that my mommy made it, and our 5 children made it. None of her children ended up in jail or murdered or anything like that. She just had something very special. And I think I have that same gift to pick myself up and keep moving. It doesn't matter how many times we came to this country. We came to this country unwillingly. We've given so much to the country. We've worked in the fields. We've done the cotton and the tobacco and the sugar. But at this point, we're still looking for restitution. We're still looking for reciprocity. And if it doesn't come, you just keep it going and keep smiling, keep encouraging children, because that's the most important thing, that our children feel that it's worth living in this life. And it is. But those things that happen, hey, that's the law. Some things are good, some things are bad. You just have to realize that it's important to keep moving, because everything.
That's a beautiful message. Shoshana, I want to come back to you with kind of a how did we get here? So there are occupations that I think you could throw out there and people would be very clear about, doctors. Okay, we certainly want to know that doctors have a certain amount of training and that people believe that they are of the quality who can treat people in an effective way without doing harm. That seems obvious to us. But flower arranging, that's the kind of thing that I think strikes most people as, well, how did that even come about? And in most cases, it's because of the people who currently do those jobs want to protect themselves and want to have a say in who can compete with them so that they can try to protect themselves from losing business that they already have.
Exactly. And it's so disgusting to me to think that people don't see the beauty in their work. I'm a giant nerd. I love my work. Even when I've done different work, I just love it. And what part of the reason I got into this area in college was because I found out about the Institute for Justice. Their attorney at the time, Clark Neely, told me about the florist license and the whole story. And, I get to do everything I love all day. Like, I'm spoiled as hell. And it kills me that other people can't do the same, and not for a good reason. Not that they really want to be a doctor, but they don't want to learn how to do it safely, but that they want to do their art, they want to do other kinds of work that are totally safe, and then people just want to keep them out. And you'll see these industries lobbying for it, and every time I try to call them out to be like, hey, I know what you're doing. But here's one really great example. I don't want to mess it up, but I'm pretty sure it was PetSmart and not Petco. But a couple of years back, their groomers ended up killing lots of dogs. Nobody could figure out what was going on, but dogs would go in, get groomed, and then they would just come out sick on their deathbeds. So then PetSmart said, oh, well, we're going to need some regulations. And it's like, no. The kid around the corner washing your dog is doing fine. The random person who's made a business out of it and now has a couple of employees, they treated dogs fine. It was PetSmart, not anyone else. And seeing them lobby for it was really, really getting to me. Even in Connecticut, a legislator, when at it for a different reason, although I think there might have been some lobbyists behind it, she said, oh, we're the only state that doesn't regulate manicures. And I'm like, that's good. Please stay that way. Like, I don't want to have to come up there. But it's so frustrating to see these industries make arguments that they know aren't true. I've spoken to cosmetologists about licensing reform, trying to find common ground. And they've yelled at me saying, oh, well, hair braiding is really dangerous. And I'm just thinking like, oh my gosh, like my dad was really bad at it, but my hair came out fine every time. Like, he didn't wreck my hair or anything. Even to quote King of the Hill, it will grow back. But the barriers that we put up for people doing work is just insane. And it often starts with regulatory capture, where the industry says, hey, we want to be regulated. You should always be wary of that. There could be a case, and there's definitely cases where it might be earnest, but there's also plenty of cases where it's not. In Louisiana, the florists are very adamant about keeping their florist license, even though they're the only state in the nation to have it. There's no evidence of harm. Unfortunately, the courts kind of go along with it, which is always very frustrating. But in all these cases, you're usually going to see the industry that's already there, already going to be either grandfathered in or something like that. They're happy to be regulated. And you always got to watch out for it because it hurts the smaller people the most, the people who don't have as much money, who can't afford to just spend lots of thousands of dollars to go to school, often for no reason. It's not going to make their work better. They've been studying elsewhere. But I think a lot of people miss that. I think a lot of politicians understandably miss it. They don't always think through this, or they don't always, jump to, hey, what about this? Maybe I should be concerned. So it's always frustrating, but you're right. It often starts with different forms of regulatory capture, or the occasional well-meaning person who's like, there ought to be a law. That guy showed up in many TV shows over the years, but he was often wrong.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, that's important. To expand on that, these regulations treat big and small the same, so that the person, your neighbor's kid washing your dog, is treated in the same way that a major corporation is treated here, when they're not the same thing. I'm reminded of stories that we heard during the onset of this pandemic of people wanting to provide food to people who were struggling, but because they're not licensed in the same way that huge industrial food providers would be licensed, that people would putting a stop to people really doing good charitable work that doesn't seem obvious that it should be subject to the same kind of regulation that a major industrial food producer would be.
Absolutely. Sometimes for a scale, I can understand how certain smaller people shouldn't be regulated as in the same way as large corporations. But even then, sometimes it's just the regulation isn't needed to begin with. But one great example here was the New Jersey pet licensing, or pet groomer licensing, was going to put an age restriction of 18. So the person grooming dogs had to be 18 or over, even though lots of teenagers do that for some money on the side, just like they'll mow a lawn or rake leaves or shovel snow. That's just another way for them to make some extra money, and there's no reason we should be stopping it. But also food regulation is just awful. The way we stop people from donating food. There's so many examples from Bloomberg in New York years ago when he was still mayor, prevented like donations because he was worried that there would be too many carbs. I'm on a low carb diet, but I don't think that we should be stopping people from eating. Like, that's not a great solution.
Maybe not our first priority there.
Right, exactly. Louisiana also had a record there. I think they had destroyed a lot of venison that some hunters donated. even I think larger corporations run into this. But the one really huge example that I've started going back to was that before the pandemic last year, Must Ministries in Georgia was donating so many sandwiches to hungry kids. It was their school lunch program. They did it during the summer too, when there were gaps in kids having food. I think they gave out like millions of volunteer donated sandwiches. No problem. 0 people complained. But of course, the state was like, oh, well, your kitchen isn't regulated. So they reorganized their whole program to make it work, which was ridiculous. Again, it was working. It was fine. But then during the pandemic, the local school district actually partnered with them to make it work and make sure that kids who weren't attending class in person because of the pandemic were able to eat. But they shouldn't have cracked down on them in the first place. You know, what if they had gone away and said, look, we just can't do this? Then during the pandemic, all these kids would have gone even more hungry. Like it would have been an even bigger problem. The way we stomp out innovation so many times, it's just heartbreaking. Whether it's someone like ISIS creating a livelihood and helping other people do the same, or even just charitable donations. It's the same thing. Bleaching food had been a big thing the past couple of years. It's always heartbreaking, but I'm glad to see it getting more attention, of course.
Isis, I want to come back to you as we focus here on solutions. And part of your story was arriving at a legislative solution in was a House bill or Bill 2717 in Texas that was signed by Governor Abbott. What did that legislation do?
Well, that legislation gave me the opportunity to earn an honest living, and it protected my constitutional rights. I remember in court when Judge Sam Sparks said that it is against her constitutional rights to stop her from braiding hair. This trade and this legacy is older than me, and I know that I'm the oldest person in this courtroom. I thought, oh my God. And then when Governor Greg Abbott said, I'm signing this bill for you, and we're going to have a little get together so that you can understand that I too want to see economic opportunities. And I thought, wow, that is so beautiful. It made me understand that even though there are people that are lobbying for their own purposes, and those that are out there that are trying to monopolize and control the market, there's still people like Governor Greg Abbott and Judge Sam Sparks that will say on the right side of things or the equal side of things that this makes sense to me. To put her out of business totally for something that she's been practicing and that's been passed down to her from generation to generation is ridiculous. So that made me very happy with my government in terms of just the pushbacks that we're doing, the deregulations that are going on. It made me understand that even though it feels as though you don't have people that are there to help, you always have someone that's going to come out and say, hey, that's what IJ did. Hey, I can represent you. I would love to represent you. We are talking about deregulations with the government. And yes, we want economic opportunity and for people to have the right, like yourself, to work. I remember when I was arrested and taken to jail, the outcry in the community, and someone posted or they sent a message. I have all these phone calls. They sent a message saying that, well, midwives, they are allowed to deliver breached babies, and they don't have a license to do so. And I don't understand how they can deliver breached babies and you can't braid hair. Mm-hmm. So I have a lot more faith in the libertarian government and those that push back on unnecessary, ridiculous licensing and regulations for people like myself. And I say that because I came from that era where people had to really learn how to go find some boots and put some strings in it to pull yourself up. So it was amazing. It was amazing. It was absolutely the best thing that happened to me. I didn't think I would ever get out of it. But yeah, here I am.
Shoshana, our conversation is entitled Removing Obstacles in Occupational Licensing. So we've had some organizations mentioned, we've had some examples mentioned. Of course, we've heard about the Institute for Justice, who represented ISIS, the Pacific Legal Foundation you'd mentioned earlier. Who are some of those resources out there that are fighting on this? And what are some of the great examples out there of reforms that are happening to remove these barriers to people seeking to rise out of poverty and move up in their station of life?
For sure. There's so many organizations doing it, which I love. I think the more the merrier. There's no shortage of good ideas, but we always need more. Goldwater also, the Goldwater Institute in Arizona does quite a bit of this too. Americans for Prosperity. There's so many organizations all over, thankfully, that are working on this. And there's all kinds of solutions, getting rid of a lot of licenses in a lot of cases. We just want to knock them out one by one. Part of the problem is that if you try to knock out too many licenses at once, you have too many lobbies saying, oh, hold on, not us, do them or whatever, but not us. Which can always be frustrating. But there's a lot of different angles too. One is the criminal justice reform angle. In so many cases, you can't get a license if you've had certain crimes, and they're like totally unrelated. It's not as though, car thieves who were convicted of that and served their time. It's not like they can't work at auto dealerships. It's like if you've ever had a crime, you can't become a radiologist. In Tennessee, there was a case of a woman who used to be a prostitute, but she got her life back on track and she wanted to become a radiologist. That was the next step. And she really felt that that was her calling, but she couldn't because prostitution is a sex crime. There's so many cases like that where the crimes are just unrelated and much older too. Again, 10 years is a pretty long time. So just making sure that if a crime is preventing someone from getting licensed, that it's very, very closely related. So that means also getting rid of all the good moral character laws. They don't mean anything. The term is literally like legally meaningless. It just means basically if you like the person or not. And that's not how our law should work. It's super unjust. So knocking those out, getting rid of them. There's also certain laws. Most of them are gone now, which is really exciting, but there's still a couple of states with them on the books where if you fall behind on student loans, the government can take away your license to work. So then you can't even work in the field you know best and make the most money to repay those loans. Officials started realizing it was total nonsense, but we still want them off the books because so long as they're on there, they can be revived. Someone down the line can decide they're a good idea. Also expanding scope of practice. We want doctors to be licensed and nurses too, but allowing nurses to do more, allowing pharmacists to do more, like with vaccines, sometimes other kinds of shots and other basic care that they're qualified to do. Just making sure that everyone's able to practice to the top of their knowledge in whatever area they're in. But a lot of times there's still protectionism and, talking medicine's a little bit scarier, but we saw a lot of good, healthy deregulation, even if only temporary during the pandemic. One area I'd like to see a lot more growth in is making sure that immigrant people can work. If you come here, you don't lose your skills. Maybe there's a test to see how your skills match up because different countries have different standards. But when we have doctors from other countries not able to work here while we have doctor shortages, it's just total nonsense. A couple of states allowed that during the pandemic, which was really exciting, but we should still work to expand that and make sure that we're matching skills and not just, telling people to start from zero. That also actually happens quite a bit with the military. People learn skills there and our governments don't help them transfer it. Like I was saying before, they have this one narrow path that you have to follow. So if you've learned your skills in any way besides their one narrow path, you're kind of out of luck and we should be changing that. Thankfully, people have been really open to different kinds of reforms, but we still need to do better there. One exciting bit of news, though, was that a couple of months ago in California, they finally allowed people who were fighting fires while incarcerated to fight fires while not incarcerated. There was a ban on that before because they were in jail, and it makes no sense, but I'm glad they got rid of that. And that was kind of like one of my white whales where I would have just loved to see that gone. So it's exciting. There's always lots more to do. a lot of wins are kind of narrow but exciting. And also the last thing I'll mention is just making sure that credentials transfer across state lines, that if you have to be licensed and if the license makes sense, we want them to be able to move around. That was another thing that had to be waived during the pandemic. In so many cases, doctors couldn't cross state lines and work. And when the pandemic was focused in very specific areas, especially, we wanted to make sure that medical professionals from all over could come there and help. And it shouldn't have taken a legal change to allow that to happen.
You reminded me of a story from some of my previous work as well in Illinois of a woman named Lisa Creason who had committed a crime when she was younger, took money out of a cash register at a store she was working at to feed her kids, paid for the crime that she committed, served time. When she got out, wanted to become a nurse in order to support her children, goes through the whole educational process to become a nurse, goes to take the exam, and finds out only then that she's prohibited because of the crime from being able to work as a nurse. And thankfully, through the work of the Illinois Policy Institute, where I used to be before I came to the Acton Institute, we were able to get the law changed. Governor Bruce Rauner signed reform several years ago that allowed people like Lisa Creason to be able to work in the nursing field when clearly the crime that she had committed early in her life had no bearing whatsoever on her qualification to help people out in the nursing field. Isis, I want to turn to you as we're coming to a close here. Talk to me now about, of course, you've got your professional line of work with hair braiding, but you through the process you've gone through, you become an advocate and passionate about these issues. What are you working on now to draw more attention to stories like yours and some of the others that we've talked about to help bring about the kinds of changes we need for people to be able to rise out of poverty, support their families, and flourish as human beings?
Yes, I started the Healing Through the Hair movement, and I was just reminded of some immigrants there in Iowa that were also given 2 years. They were going to be given 2 years in prison for braiding hair. So I'm trying to unite all these stories across the country through the healing. One of the things that I want to do is to make sure that the banks open up. There's so many restrictions and laws against getting money and funding because I didn't get funding to start moving my projects along, my initiatives along. I'm trying to create a circle of people that can come together, angels, supporters, sponsors that can come together to help me do my film. And the film is going to include all these young people who are really dealing, and even in the military, there are people that are still struggling with wearing their hair natural and becoming natural hair stylists. So this film is going to help other people learn more. There's so many people that don't know about the regulations that go on that impede the progress of those of us that want to do better for ourselves and that are doing better for ourselves, but we need to collectively come together and find the funds because the banks are not opening up for us. And we understand that that too is systematic. And we are trying our best to do this film so that everybody wins. That's what I'm doing right now. Economic opportunities for all the young women in Louisiana, women in Tennessee, women all over. There were like 30 women that were fined last year for braiding over $100,000. So I want all these stories to be told. There were babies that have gone to school with their locks and their braids, and teachers have cut their hair off because they said that the beads and the braids are annoying. There are kids that can't graduate. There's so many stories out here. They are now on. This is a timing for us to really take the platform and take the narrative and do something tremendous with it. So we're looking for funding and sponsoring our narrative. That's what I'm doing right now.
Well, Isis, your story is absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for joining us today to share that story about what you overcame and your work. Shoshana, thank you so much for joining us to share your expertise on this area. We're really thrilled for you to be able to bring that to our Poverty Cure Summit. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us for the Acton Institute. I'm Eric Cohn. Thank you.